Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blabbit. It's great to see all of you here. It's great to see my friends here as well. For those of you who are tuning into Blabbit for the first time, this is the platform where we get to talk to experts, different guest experts on a weekly basis about the things that they do, their experiences, their insights, and then we get to share it with you. So these conversations are insightful, they're fun, and they are spontaneous. If this is your first time, my name is Paul Geiger. I am one half of the co-hosting team here at Blabbit, and I am a New York City public speaking coach and presentation expert. And one of the topics we're probably going to cover today is all about clarity. And that's what I do with my clients, is make sure that their message is clear and they're giving themselves permission to tell it. Glenn?
Hey, thanks, Paul. My name is Glenn Ingram. For the better part of the last 2 decades, I've been working on mastering and helping others understand listening and influence. That's right, sales. Because if we don't listen and we can't coordinate with someone, they're probably not going to buy from you. Ben, welcome. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself real quick, if you would, please.
Yes. So my name is Ben Stein. I am the founder and chief Plateau breakthrough coach at Purpose Up. And I help mid to senior level professionals land or create their dream job, find more fulfillment, more money, all of that good stuff.
Excellent. Again, thanks for being here with us today, Ben. We have talked on various episodes of Blabbit about the topic of limiting beliefs. So
Yes.
You, as a Plateau breakthrough coach, when I say the word limiting beliefs, what is the first thing or the first few things that immediately come to mind that you've experienced with the people that you work with?
With my clients, I was just on a call yesterday where one of the limiting beliefs is I don't have a college degree. That can be one of those things that can hold really successful professionals back from taking that next leap or thinking that they're qualified against other folks. Not to say that that's not an obstacle to overcome, but other ones are, am I really ready for that next level? Is it worth it to jump if I've got something that's working just fine? And, who am I to really be going out there and really pitching myself? I'm not that type of person who can really sell myself. So it's just, I should just say where I am. Those are some of the things that I see most often.
Mm-hmm. And you see the same thing, Glenn, right? Limiting beliefs from your purview. What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
If you believe you can, you can. And if you believe you can't, you're right there as well.
Yeah, it definitely goes back to that. All right. So when you say a Plateau breakthrough coach, those are chosen words. Explain to us, does that have something to do with it seems to associate with the way that we learn in plateaus? Is that correct? Could you just detail that a bit more?
Yeah, so it really speaks to how in life and in our careers, we often grow and then we hit plateaus and we kind of get stuck there. And it's tough for us to figure out how to climb that next mountain. And it can be also a matter of figuring out which mountain is the next best one to climb. So oftentimes the folks I meet are successful, but they've come up against a ceiling. And it's trying to figure out what is the combination of mindset, vision, and strategy to help take them to their next level. And there's lots of different challenges they could be facing, but it's really helping them break through that plateau to reach their next level of excellence.
Well, when you speak about those plateaus, I know in my experience, I see a lot of larger corporations where between director and VP is that level that you were mentioning about with having a degree versus not having a degree. So at what point does experience, knowledge, and expertise outweigh that? Or are most companies just still steadfast in old beliefs that in order to have that VP, you have to have that little initial behind your name?
So it's a good question, and it depends on the company. If you're working for a big old school company that really just needs to follow the rules, you may be out of luck there. But more and more companies I'm seeing are forward thinking, and they value the experience over a degree, especially for someone who's made it through to the director level and have proven themselves. And it's at this point when I talk to my clients, it's like, what do you really want? There's a certain amount being dictated to you, but I think oftentimes folks get to a certain level and they just start to kind of accept the box that they're in, and they stop really fighting for what it is that they want, and they stop really going for what they want with all of their effort. And so it's about really taking that individual and looking at them and being like, okay, what do you really want, and what do you want at all costs, and really going for that. And that changes the conversation a little bit. Does that make sense?
It does. And if I could real quick, Paul,
Mhm.
do you also talk to him about that life-work balance? Because I've seen a lot of friends that I've known for 20, 30 years that strive to want that VP level at larger companies. And then once they receive it, they realize my life was better at the other one, even at less pay, because now I'm working 80 hours a week versus 50 hours a week.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm a firm believer that we want to have a job that lights us up. And if it is a job that is requiring 80 hours a week and it doesn't light you up, then that's going to lead to burnout, and that's going to lead to unhappiness. So with my clients, we talk about that happiness criteria, like what is going to make you happy in your next job. And so if it is a VP role that does have 80 hours and you know that that's not going to align with how you work, then that's probably not the right goal for you. And that comes back to climbing the right mountain. So a lot of us and a lot of the people I talk to have been following this path of external validation and what society and culture deems as success. And they get to that top of the mountain. They're like, wait, this is it? This is not what I was supposed to feel like when I got here. So oftentimes there's this reevaluation that needs to occur about, okay, what do I really want to be doing? And what is my intuition? What is my spirit? What does my soul tell me? I mean, I'm deep into tactics, but I got a little bit of woo. So I'm happy to talk about that with my clients.
So when you talk about creating a dream job, are you across the board talking about becoming an entrepreneur? In other words, creating your own business, or are you saying attracting a job that has the qualities that do, as you say, light you up within some other organization? Could you talk about that just a little bit?
So the answer is yes, Paul.
Yeah.
My offer is worded carefully to allow for both of those, because I don't believe that all of us should go down the entrepreneurial path, or we could be an entrepreneur inside of a company. And I think there are a lot of great growth opportunities within corporate confines out there. So it depends on the person and it depends on the case. And I like working with both people to help them realize what their next best step is. And for some people, it is starting their own thing. For some people, it's A, getting that next best job, and then B, starting that side hustle to help them get on a trajectory that they're more aligned with. And for some people, it is just, hey, I want to go from VP to senior VP or to the C-suite, and figuring out the combination to get them there.
So when you look at that why and determination, if I'm going to go up the corporate ladder or if I'm going to go do my own thing, what couple of questions or what couple of things can you talk with someone about to help them identify personally what their best path forward is?
Well, the first question is, what do you want?
Ooh,
Right?
that's a tough one. That's
Yeah.
a tough one.
Because you have that what I want and what I need, and sometimes they butt heads.
They sure do. Yeah, there's a reality of paying bills, and there's the reality of putting money on putting food on the table. So first, we want to figure out what someone really wants, because if you are constantly not listening to what you want and you're just going through the motions, then you will be denying part of who you are for long periods of time. And taking a step back. One of the things I talk about is personal integrity, and that can mean keeping your word. But I think it's best described by a quote by Gandhi. Happiness is when what you say, think, and do are all in alignment. And I don't maybe agree with the happiness word there, but integrity, or you feeling that you're on your authentic journeys when what you do, say, and think are all aligned. And so there may be a long path to get there, and it doesn't mean you need to become an entrepreneur tomorrow. But if you're not listening to what's inside, and for me, I wanted to become an entrepreneur for many years, and I stayed safe in my comfort zone in corporate. And it wasn't until a restructure happened and I had my side hustle going for a couple of years of coaching, and I was like, okay, do I want to do this full time now or not? Because I could have easily gone back into the product management world that I was in, but I was like, no, I could fail at this, but I'm going to regret it if I don't try it. So with all of that, there was the pre-planning, the training, the side hustle. So I don't recommend people just kind of jump off without any wings, but but if I kept in corporate and denied who I was, I don't think I'd be the father that I want to be to my kids, or the husband, or the person I want to be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've just been around a couple of people in the last few months that are at that pivotal point, and they want to do this, but that fear of, can I do it? Will I succeed? Will I fail? Sometimes is bigger in some people, and some of us are adrenaline junkies that like change.
Yes.
Well, and that's very true. We do pay attention, or our attention is grabbed by a real 180 transformation that occurs. And I realize that the process that you go through with your clients is one that occurs over time. But if you could take a snapshot of before and after, do you have an example of somebody who was doing this over here, and then 6 months later, a year later, they were doing this? And just for our viewing audience to hear about a really drastic transformation, or something that just, wow, they were doing that and now they're doing this.
Yeah.
Anything like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, two examples come to mind, and they're kind of those two paths, that corporate path and that entrepreneurial path. So the latest recommendation I just got the other day on LinkedIn, a young woman named Taylor, a very bright, talented woman, and she had a side hustle working on food tours and a day job doing software sales. And when she came to me, she essentially was looking. I mean, I was able to intuit. She was looking for permission to go full time and expand this business. And so we worked on, what does that plan look like over time, so that she could leave the day job that was basically sucking her soul, and do more of what she really loved, which was the food tour, which she was doing on weekends, and how could she do it full time? And so in the time we worked together, and even in the sales call, our follow-up sales call, I got her husband on the line too, because she had to get buy-in from her husband, and there was like fear around family finances and all that. But she operates a food tour with some partners out of Delray, and they recently expanded to Fort Lauderdale, and that business is growing, and she's really excited and happy. And I think stepping into the coaching and giving herself permission to do that allowed for that transformation for her to step into that fully. And it's really exciting seeing what she's creating with that now.
So for someone like that, how much do you see the pressure, the weight that we carry until we get to that point? I know, speaking for myself, the day I walked out of my job the last time 10 years ago, it was amazing how I was walking a little bit lighter. My head was up a little bit more, and the weight on my back was just gone. And we carry that until we can make that decision. And then once you have the strength to do it, it's so freeing.
100%. And, with the example of Taylor, when she made the decision to do coaching and she got the buy-in from her husband and her family, that was like step one. And then step two was like, okay, what does that ramp up plan look like? So she had it on paper and she started activating on it, and then, putting in that resignation. And I totally agree with you. There's times in my life, and I'll kind of go through them very briefly, and if we want to dive into anything deeply, where I've been totally held back by fear. The first was when I was in my late 20s and I was a hot mess. I was kind of abusing alcohol and weed too much, and those are my coping mechanisms from teenage years that stopped working. And for me to reach out and get help was something that weighed on me for a while and I put off. And then coaching was transformational for me and allowed me to change the trajectory of my life. Same with starting a podcast, something I'd wanted to do for a while, and then finally I took the plunge, did it. Same with becoming an entrepreneur, writing a kid's book, all these things that was like on my mind for a while. But once I did it, I was so happy I did it. And I talk with my clients often about the quicker that we're able to feel the fear and then take action on it, the more success that we're going to have.
A lot of times your biggest obstacle to success is comfortability.
100%. Yeah. So it's our comfort zone kills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you mentioned just a few moments ago about putting together a plan. And I know coaching my clients that I say to them so often that the concepts that I'm going to make you aware of in terms of public speaking and presenting are extremely, extremely simple. And it sounds to me like the game plan is very basic and very simple, but I always tell them the hard part is the execution. Do you experience the same thing, Ben?
Yes. Yeah. The saying I like around that is knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Right. So yes, 100%. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. I was on a client call earlier today with one of my clients who knows what his habits for success are, and he's lived them and he's fallen off them. So it was like a matter of getting him back on track with what those things are that make each day successful, that he can build on each other. So he's not in overwhelm, not in anxiety, not in an unresourceful state. So yes, accountability is huge. And I like to play some games with my clients to ratchet up the accountability if they're not doing what they're saying they're going to do, and to kind of build that integrity muscle of them doing what they say they're going to do, because that's where you really build confidence in yourself, your word to yourself, and you make progress.
Well, I think that's the whole reason that there are coaches, is really for accountability, because we often don't hold ourselves as accountable as we should in order to get the results that we actually deserve.
Yes.
Yeah. With regards to that, I always look at, the only way you win if you're keeping score. I remember a coach getting very upset with us in football in high school and throwing things against the wall and said, if it doesn't matter if we win or lose, why are we keeping score? So with that, in the past, I would always, coming up here on the holidays, would take those times around Christmas and New Year's and kind of evaluate the previous year and make plans to look forward to the next year. And we had a guest on here a few months ago, Paul, that said right now, as quickly as our times are changing, that should probably be something we do at least quarterly. What's your opinion on that? And how would you advise people as they're making these determinations, how often to kind of go through set their goals up and trying to evaluate and determine what they should do on a regular basis?
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of tracking. And one of my business coaches, when we put my KPIs together, he calls it all data, no drama, because we often can get emotional as humans about if we're doing well or not. And those emotions sometimes actually cloud the reality of the picture. So you could be doing great in your business or in your career, but you may not feel that way. And vice versa, you may be feeling like you're doing great, but the numbers are actually not there. So from a business perspective, I've got my KPIs around sales calls and conversions, et cetera, and track those, on a weekly and monthly basis, and target that for the future. In the professional world, and this is huge for resumes, is taking time, whether it's weekly, monthly, or quarterly, to take account of your achievements and have a running list of achievements, because that's going to be your best friend when it comes time to update your resume. So you don't have to think about what percentage did I increase revenue for the company or XYZ. So I think creating a recurring invite in your calendar where you take some time to take stock and have a process for doing that can really put you ahead, allow you to look at things with an objective point of view and know where to tweak for the future, because you know which knobs and dials to turn.
Do you feel that most of us pay more attention to the occasional bump in the road, the occasional failure, and not as much attention, as you say, to the term we've heard before, Glenn, the small wins? What do you think, Ben? Do you think
Yeah,
most of us think that way?
I think we're wired as humans to avoid failure, and so failure could lead in our monkey primitive minds into social ostracization, and then we die because of lack of resources, because nobody likes us anymore. So if we've got this kind of primitive brain, so we're wired to kind of avoid situations where we're going to die or get eaten by a tiger, and it's a great practice to celebrate our small wins. And I don't think it comes naturally. And it's like a practice like mindfulness or meditation. But what it does, and I was just listening to a fascinating podcast with Andrew Huberman out of Stanford, who's a psychologist. And he talks about when we celebrate those small wins, like 10 more minutes of this focus time or running and we reach that next lamppost, we release dopamine, and those dopamine hits allow us to focus more and allow us to stay on the path, because dopamine is really there to reinforce that you're on the right path. So when we celebrate, we actually give ourselves more energy and focus, which is kind of a cool way to look at that feedback loop.
Nice.
So here's one thing I'm interested in. When you mentioned KPIs earlier, and a lot of times large companies have KPIs that they've been using for a long time without taking time to really analyze the numbers and do cost-based analysis and stuff like that. So how much, when you're helping someone develop, whether again they're going to be working for someone else or for themselves, to really digest, look at the numbers, and perhaps come up with their own numbers as better ways to track things? Because like I said, some of the numbers I've seen people do are large companies where we have X, Y, Z, and A and B, and they didn't realize that you're not subtracting B from A. So your odds of winning and reaching those numbers are difficult because they're setting people up to fail from the beginning, because they weren't very numbers oriented, the people that develop these KPIs.
Right. Well, I think it's always good to ask yourself, okay, what am I being measured against and how I'm being measured? And so, especially when I look at executives that are stepping into C-suite roles, they often, if it is a forward-thinking company, they get the opportunity to ask themselves, okay, how are we doing? How are we measuring that? Are we measuring the right things? And for those that aren't in those C-suite roles that are managing, they get to have those clear conversations with their managers, like, okay, what am I really being measured against? Is this a good measure? And how are we going to know if I'm successful or not? And that's the same that I like to do at the beginning of my engagements with a client. It's like, what does success look like at the end of our time together? And how are we going to measure that? So I think, to your point, there are some of those institutional measurements that we may not be able to influence, but if we can pick what are the levers that are really going to equal success to the people around me, and that we can all align with, that is more useful. And I help people land their next roles and then often continue executive coaching with them, and to help them level up in their leadership. You start with what it is that you want, that vision, and then from there, what is the strategy to get there? And part of that strategy is figuring out, okay, how are we going to solve this problem, and how are we going to know if this problem is solved? So I think it's always good to come back to those fundamentals and revisit them to see, are we measuring the right thing?
Yeah, it's always interesting when you work for different companies, because I've had 3 times in my career where I've done cost-based analysis and said, this is what we're doing, but we should do this. And the first and the second time from the owners of the company said, I don't care what your idea is, we're going to do what we're doing. And it wasn't until the third time they're like, wow, those numbers didn't make sense. Yes, our mascot is here. He's ready to speak.
I was not clear if that was your supervisor or not, Glenn, just keeping an eye on you, just
someone needs to keep an eye on me.
He's doing a ride along with you.
Yes.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Ben, talk a little bit about some of the experience. I know we talked earlier about you went through a reorg and suddenly the rug got pulled out from under you. It sounds like it wasn't a situation that was ideal. Maybe it was just out of necessity. just tell us a little bit about that, because we're in the great resignation right now. So this is really top of mind for a lot of people. And I think your experience, just give us a context of when it occurred in your career, and what the feelings were, what you had to let go of, and what you had to embrace.
Sure. Yeah. So early 2018, my first child had just been born. I was living in New York City, and I was a VP of product for a small .com. And some of my coworkers had been let go before my paternity leave. And then, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm on the chopping block, maybe not. But I was like, oh, they probably would have let me go with the others. But I came back, and then it was like, nope, you're going with the rest of your department. And I do remember getting brought into the CEO's office, and it was kind of like those surreal moments where you kind of step outside of yourself, and you're kind of like, oh no. And I kind of, the part of me was in denial, but part of me knew exactly what was going to happen. And it was numb and shock, even though I kind of knew it was coming. So it was an interesting combination, and there were so many signals, because so many signals in retrospect that I should have read, but regardless. And as I was working in the Woolworth building at the time, as I was leaving the building, I got a call from a business coach who I was considering a program with, and I had my box in my hand, and I was like just leaving, and I was like, he's like, so are you in? And I'm like, I mean, if there's a sign from the universe, this is probably it right now. I'm like, all right, let's go for it. And so it was that, that I wanted to become a coach, but I was terrified. I was like, how can I live without benefits? And how is this all going to be possible? So it took a leap of faith. And so I had good financial runway. So I wouldn't recommend somebody taking that leap unless they do have runway. And building a business takes longer and costs more than you think. So those are some words of advice for anyone, not to discourage you from doing that, but just to continue to plan and prepare for all of that, socking money away and working on the mindset. But yeah, I had a choice then of looking for another job in product management or going full time and with coaching. And I was like, talked about it with my wife, and it's like, if I don't do this now, I may not do it. And at that time, we decided to leave New York to have a better quality of life down in Florida. And my in-laws were here to get help with the kids. And at that time, I thought it would be cheaper, but turns out not that much different at this point. But you definitely can get a little bit more space, at least for a while. So yeah, it sucked at the time. It was the first time I'd ever been let go, and it was terrifying, and it was exhilarating too.
So you bring up a really interesting point, which is absolutely the truth. And I saw Glenn nodding his head as well. And that is, the business takes a lot longer than you think to get started. And it really doesn't matter what the business is. It's not just a coaching business. Glenn, you've had that experience. I know I walked away from a really comfortable situation, talk about comfort zones, just about 2 years ago. And things, it's still a work in progress, just getting to the place where you feel comfortable enough and secure enough. And really, I think it's a matter of knowing enough people, because those opportunities come along. But we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Glenn, what was your experience like with that? I know you've been in the game a little bit longer than I.
Well, it's one thing. I think the biggest reason why we see small businesses fail is we see people come out that were in the situation like you were in, like Paul was in, like I was in. And we have experience, whether it be operations, sales, whatever your background is. Maybe you're a chef, maybe you're a plumber, something like this. And you are, for whatever reason, thrust into, I'm going to start my business. But now you don't have that HR person do the hiring. You don't have the accounts payable to pay the bills and to manage all these things for you. You are, as one of my old bosses used to say, now chief cook and bottle wash. So remember we had Faith Jones on a few months ago that was talking about helping people understand how to create a business, how to do all these little things to hopefully alleviate as many failure or options of failure as possible. So how do you coach through people when they're going to be going from a C-suite corporate level or whatever to their own business, and they don't have that suite of people around them? You're going to have to learn all these things and to be able to do a lot of things and probably be working 80, 100 hours a week for a while because there's not someone else to do these other functions.
It's a good question. And there's a couple fundamentals. One, from a mindset perspective, I always talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And the ability to have a growth mindset, which means to a fixed mindset person looks as the world to be judged on and their abilities is fixed. Person with growth mindset looks at the world as a playground to be explored, and that if they put enough effort into anything, they can get better at it. And so with all of that, I'll use my coaching experience as an example. I was solid at coaching when I started and pretty good, but I wasn't good at sales, wasn't good at marketing, wasn't good at bookkeeping, some fundamentals of the business. And so all those things I had to learn. And we have to give ourselves permission to suck at something and then get better at it. And just with everything in those skills. And then once we get good enough at it, the ability to then figure out how to delegate what is not our sweet spot and what is not a high value activity. So when I first start with someone, I'm going to be like, okay, first, do you have an idea of how you're going to generate income? Do you have a business plan? And is that viable? So you just kind of do have some sort of roadmap of how the financials may work for you that you're working towards. I think that's super important. And then I think it's honestly about getting support where your blind spots are. So I've invested a lot into business coaches to help me improve my sales process, improve my marketing and lead generation and automation, et cetera, and all those things to help me grow. And I will probably continue to do that over time because those investments are important. So I want to start with A, is there a viable idea? B, what are the gaps that you need to learn to get there? And what's the plan to get there?
So what I find interesting as I'm listening to you describe that is there are things that I believed. This wasn't necessarily a limiting belief, but eventually it became a limiting belief. Mm-hmm. I believed that I was really good at sales. I believed that I was really good at marketing. And 2 years ago, nobody could have told me differently. So it's so true. But now I realize the error of my ways. So you must have to overcome that from time to time, that people just don't believe that they're not good at something, and they either need to learn how to do it better or be willing to delegate it to somebody who can. True?
I think most of us entrepreneurs start off thinking that the road to success is the highway across Arizona that's straight and don't realize it's a country road in Missouri.
Yeah, 100%. And, speaking to what you said, Paul, I worked in advertising for a number of years. Doesn't mean I can make a great ad or one that would convert today because everything changes. Yes. And to your point, Glenn, yes, it is about these fits and starts and plateaus and shooting up. So it isn't a linear journey. It's that squiggle and just making progress towards that end.
Let's talk about just really quickly as a little sidebar, maybe not a sidebar, but it's certainly important information, really a place where you and I, Ben, in terms of our coaching, we do overlap. And that is in the area of interviews. And I know that that's something that you coach a lot of your clients on. What would you say is there a general rule of thumb? Is there a general approach that you use in terms of making sure that people are telling the right version, the right narrative of what it is that they're doing? Are there certain things that you have to watch out for? Are there certain inherent self-sabotaging things that happen in interviews, specifically within interviews, that you guide your clients away from?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm curious to how you guide your clients with this as well. I've got a framework that I take my clients through to help them prepare for an interview. Because the first thing is you want to be prepared, because the more prepared you are, the more confident you are. And so I chunk it for each interview is, okay, think about it like a court case, and that you are going to be making a case. So first is, what is your opening argument that's going to be about 1 or 2 minutes long? And that's the tell me about yourself. And so that's not a open invitation to just kind of tell your whole life story. It is a focused piece that really summarizes your strengths, summarizes your accomplishments, and ties that into the job description. So then from there, it's having the quiver of stories that you can be like, that demonstrate those strengths, and telling those 3 to 5 stories that you have in your back pocket that you've already prepared and you've already matched to the strengths in the job description, so that you're continuing to make that case. And then lastly, I like to really help them with some of the softer skills of being able to read the interviewer, understand the body language, and how to really accentuate their own body language to keep some interest, to use a little bit of suspense to keep someone who's probably over maxed with too many things to do in their head and keeping their attention, and using some tips and tricks there. So that's how I approach it from a high level.
Yeah, and I agree that the content is so important. It's so important that you know the stories that define you, but also so that you craft them into stories that don't sound like you are walking somebody through your resume. Basically give them titles that are unexpected, so that as listeners they go, well, what do you mean by that? And that's when you hook them. And we talked about this, Glenn, in previous episodes. You have 90 seconds to make your first impression. 90 seconds. So I always say, pick your best story, lead with that, but then also know the words that describe your story based on this extraordinary title you've come up with, and also this strong framework. Know what the adjectives are. Know it's not just the factual information, but the description of this story, because those words will pop up within an interviewer's questions or just within their conversation. Because we all know, ideally, an interview should feel like a conversation. How often have we left an interview saying, that was fantastic. It was just like we were two guys talking. That was it. And the conversation went really well. It didn't feel like it fell flat anywhere. So it's really a matter of giving the interviewee, being able to give themselves permission to tell those stories. And it does require that you be bold, that you have to be listening in order to make sure that the stories fit in some way. But there's also ways of kind of jamming them in there that are unexpected. And again, if you don't prepare, then you can't give yourself permission to do it. And that's where things start to get, bottled up.
Yeah.
Well, and then let's take a look at when Ben started his coaching back practice and he had to go out and be the salesperson, do the stuff. Everything you guys said apply to a sales call. It's because sometimes as a salesperson, we're so worried about telling about why someone should hire us, what we can do for them, instead of taking the time at the beginning to have an interview, have a conversation, get to know one another, and make sure that we have similar traits, similar beliefs, similar backgrounds, because inevitably longer relationships are with people that we know, we like, and we trust. So we don't take time to develop that at the beginning, because sometimes we're in such a hurry to try and sell something or close something.
Well, and there is a difference. There definitely, though, is a difference between a sales call and an interview, because you go into an interview knowing the dynamic is that person asks the question, I have to answer. They ask the question, I have to answer. But it's a different dynamic in sales. If you're a good salesperson, you have stories, you have solutions, but you need to ask all of those questions. I always tell everyone, because one of the biggest worries is, well, what are they going to ask me? What are they? I want to make sure I have the right answer. What if it didn't matter? What if it actually didn't matter what they asked you, but you knew what it was that you wanted to tell them? So I think it goes back to what you were saying, Ben, about in the interview, have a very sort of bold mission statement about how you're going to talk about yourself, and just look for the opportunity to drop that in
Yeah, but I
as
think
quickly as possible.
the commonality between the sales call and the interview is, do I want a relationship with this person? And if you're in an interview and if you're in a sales call, ultimately you're looking to pull some emotional levers that have you connect with the person. So when you're in an interview, it's like you're qualified if your resume is in there. So then it's more of a question of, do I see myself working with this person? And similar, if someone's willing to take a sales call with you, they've seen enough that they're like, okay, I'm really considering this person. Now let me see if this is really worth the investment. And so either in both of them, it's important to build that rapport, and that can start with small talk. That can start with, what you guys have in common. If you've done your research in an interview and you said like, oh, we have gone to the same school, or you're interested in the same charity, or you like to ski or snowboard, whatever. Look for those commonalities, because we want to touch as many of those, synapses as possible to kind of light up those networks. Like, oh yeah, like what Glenn was saying, that people like us, that we can kind of share stuff in common with, and ultimately, emotionally being able to read them and flip those triggers, because oftentimes out of an interview, people will have a feeling, and they'll be like, oh, I had a good feeling about them or a bad feeling about them. Same as a sales call. And then they'll have that feeling, and then from that feeling, they will then draw some logic from that they'll report to other people. But ultimately, it's about how you made them feel. And if you're not confident and unsure of yourself, they're like, I don't know if this person can really perform here, or if they have the right experience. But it's really about how, and this is where I get a little bit woo-woo, it's about your vibration, and people sense your vibration. And if it's off, they'll sense it. They won't know the right words for it. But if you can, resonate with them, then you're doing well.
Well, you bring up a good point about them having already seen your resume. That's usually step number one in order to get your foot in the door and actually be called in for an interview or doing a virtual interview. So isn't the interview process really a determination of culture fit at that point? That's really what we're talking about, which is, do I get along with this person? Can I see myself working with this person? Can I see our company providing an environment for this person, and vice versa, that this person being productive within that environment? And you're right. Do I feel good about it?
You've checked yes to them on Tinder and you're a match, and then it's like, okay, do I want to share more meals with this person?
That's right. So make it just a good coffee time.
That's right.
Well, and I think another similarity when you're walking into there is like when you're walking into a sales call. If you're all uptight about it, you're nervous about it, you're scared about losing it, your odds of losing it increase. If you walk into it with the thought process is, I have nothing right now when I'm walking in the door, I'm not losing anything if I walk out without it, then a lot of times I think for that, you are in a better position. You are more open. You are going to have that conversation because you don't have the fear of loss.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And some coaching that I've gotten on this that I absolutely love is they talk about taking a magic minute or 5 minutes before the call and actually literally closing your eyes and thinking about the person that you're going to be meeting with, and imagining a light of energy going from you to them that's actually filled with love, and thinking about how you're going to serve them, how you're going to get to their truth, and how you're really going to, whatever the outcome is, really make sure that you're coming at it from a place of love and service. And from that point of view, you just even open the call more calm, centered, and they can kind of feel that energy, and it can change the dynamic. So your mindset and your body set going into it is super important. And that same advice can go for interviews. If you spend some time, whether it's in your car beforehand or before you get in the building, doing some breaths, imagining, the love in the room, it can make a difference.
Now, your company, is it Purpose Up?
Yes.
That is the website as well. So I just had a thought, the word purpose, doesn't it seem, and please correct me because I'm going to give a fairly ignorant observation of the word, but doesn't the word purpose sound like it relies on people's perceptions of you? A little, maybe that's a cop-out to say that, but what do you, in terms of purpose, how do you define that? How do you make it actionable, and how do you execute on that, finding purpose and then staying on the path to that purpose?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I realized early on from a business point of view, you want to solve people's problems that are keeping them up at night. And people wonder about purpose and they think about it, but most of the time, that's not the problem keeping them up at night. Like, what's my purpose? And more so, it is, how am I going to get my next job? How can I be happy working? So that's why I don't bill myself as a finding your purpose coach. There are some of those out there, but for me, helping people when they're in need of a transition allows me to do the work that I do. So it's, giving them what they want and then selling them what they want and giving them what they need. So with all of that, I am a big believer in living a more purposeful life. So taking a step back, I think there's a tremendous amount of baggage around the word purpose. So I don't think it's something that you find, like you look under a rock for it. And some people just may know what they want to always do, but some people like myself weren't entirely sure or fought it for a long time. But with that being said, when I talk to my clients, we do a few different activities to help you figure out how to live more purposefully, which is a much productive conversation than what's your purpose. So how can you live more purposefully? And so one thing is like keying into what energizes you, what lights you up versus what drains you, and keeping on that path of course correction of things that energize you versus drain you. And then we also can do things like inner work, guided meditations. We can analyze the past and look for clues that point towards where your purpose are. So there's a bunch of different activities, and I've got like a whole workshop on this to help people distill it. But ultimately, what we want to do is more of those things that light us up. And I believe that there's a service component to that that also marries our skills and abilities. And when we can kind of combine those, kind of like that term, kagi, where what you do can get paid for, what the world needs, and what you're passionate about, all of those together kind of can help someone move towards it. And if you focus on living more purposefully each day, you're going to be in business.
What struck me when you were saying that is listening to the world around you. I know there have been different points of my life where I'm kind of slow. I had to listen to hear the same thing 2, 3, or 4 times, but it's like, wait a second. If Paul told me this, if Ben said this to me, if Jill said this to me, all within a short period of time, maybe I should listen and think about this. And I say that because I just had a gentleman I've known for 3 years contact me yesterday that never was willing to spend money on what I do for my day job. And he said, Glenn, I've had 5 people call me and one really bugged me about doing this. So maybe we should talk about this. Maybe this is the world telling me I need to do X. So as these people are at that why, do you ever talk to them about, what have you heard? What's going on with you? What is the world trying to tell you to help get you to where you should be going?
I definitely believe in signs from the universe and reading the tea leaves. And so with all of that, one of the powerful transformations in my journey was stepping away from the external validation and what I should be doing versus opening up my channel to my intuition and listening to really what was inside of me. And I think when you kind of open up that channel, and it's a continuing practice for me, you start to notice those serendipities and synchronicities in the universe. So I think it is powerful, and part of my job as a coach is to really listen to what is coming up for the client and reflect that back to them, so it kind of reinforces where they're at and they can have more of those ahas.
Mm-hmm. And I know in my experience, really the driving force was having a need to be of service, because for the longest time I had spent many decades working as a performer and doing all sorts of, entertainment type things and presentational type things. And I realized that what was really missing was the purpose. Like, what is the purpose of this? Just to entertain, though that is fine. That's fine. But it wasn't enough for me. What I needed to do was to be able to help other people tell their stories rather than me telling mine necessarily. But within that, I get to tell my story, which has now changed because of the network that I have been blessed to be a part of for over a dozen years. So it's interesting. We have different motivations. And as we're talking about having these aha moments, when I was at that crossroads, that why that you're talking about, Glenn, I was offered the opportunity to go in this direction, in a direction of service to others. And I literally had one of those light bulb moments when this was presented to me. And literally, it was like a cartoon. It's like, ding, there we go. So that helped me too.
Well, and I think that purpose is something that a lot of us don't take the time. I mean, I've seen too many people that I call have title envy. They're worrying about this title and that title without knowing if they're even making any more money or if it's helping them in their lives because they're chasing a title. So for anyone watching this or watching this in the future, what will be one or two things that you would share with them to say, this is what you might want to ask yourself to help identify that purpose?
Yeah. There's a great TED talk that speaks to what you were just saying, Glenn, about destination addiction. And I forget whose talk it was, but it's a great talk. And we just want to go from that next to the next to the next. And so one question, you guys heard of the concept of do, be, have versus have, do, be.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go over that really quickly. Most people in, let's just call it the rat race, spend their time in do, have, be. I need to work more. I need to do more so that then I can have that next title. I can have that raise. So then I can be happy and be fulfilled, right? But then they just end up doing more, and then they get the stuff and they're not really happy. And then they wonder why they don't have those states of beings that they're striving for. So for someone looking for more purpose, taking that paradigm of be, do, have, where you start with, who do I get to be today? So for example, I get to be more confident, I get to be more playful, I get to be more present, I get to be more impactful. Those are things that I want to embody more. And we get to ask ourselves from that place, what do I get to do? I get to show up here and be my best. I get to figure out what's going to be most impactful in my business and clients. And then from that doing, you either have or you get the results you want, or you don't, but you're not attached to the outcome. So in living a more purposeful life, when we focus on our states of being rather than the outcome, and we focus on the journey rather than any specific goal, not that we shouldn't have goals that are important, but we allow ourselves a lot more happiness and fulfillment. And so that's where I would start. And I like what Tony Robbins has to say about this. He says, there's a formula to success. There's patterns out there and we can model people, but there's an art to fulfillment, and that's unique for each one of us. And so it's a great question to be in. What will fulfill me? And a part of that is service. How can I serve others? And oftentimes in coaching, people talk about your mess being your message, and turning that around. And for you, Paul, it's your story about how can I turn my storytelling into helping others, or Glenn, with your corporate career, into helping other businesses thrive, that you can often use those gifts and talents and experience, and then figure out the best way to give that to others. And that's where the fulfillment lies, whether it is a business or volunteer work, or whatever form that takes.
So it's almost, you have to start off with the end in mind. What do I want to be? To be there, what do I have to get there? And if I'm going to get there, what am I going to do?
Yeah, and I think a distinction to that is there's a distinction between a state of being, which is what I get to embody right now. So I can be powerful right now if I want to. I can be confident right now, and having access to that today, not when you reach that state, and the power of having a vision that helps draw you forward, and the visualization of being in that today as well. That's another thing I talk with my clients around, that visualization of being there now and experiencing that now to make that gap easier to bridge.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you, that was, as I was listening to you describe all of that, Ben, that was like the mic drop moment of this episode of Blabbit. I mean, literally, do not be surprised if that doesn't make its way into the highlights. Okay, so if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
You can reach me at purposeup.com. That's my website, the word purpose, the word up together, and you can message me there. You can find me on social media there. That's the easiest way to find me.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Ben. This has been a great hour. And before we know it, like usual, our hour is up.
But we will be back next week. So everyone, please keep tuning in to Blabbit. Watch for us on social media platforms. And this is not the last you will hear from Ben Stein. I guarantee it.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Take care, Ben.